shift, the stakes are high. The mag breaks it down, no need to sigh. From EU rules to global news, Reg with Meg, your trusted views.
Hey guys, welcome back to Reg with Meg's Regulatory News Recap. We have a lot to cover today for July's news, with significant updates coming out of Switzerland, Saudi Arabia, the European Union, and Mexico.
It's definitely a busy time in the regulatory world. Let's dive right in and start with Switzerland. Swissmedic recently held a detailed webinar on swissdamed, and for anyone who isn't familiar, swissdamed is essentially Switzerland's national database for medical devices, similar in function to Eudamed in the EU.
Right, and getting all the device data into that system has been a major focus. The deadlines have shifted a few times, so what's the final word from this webinar?
Okay, so the most important date to have circled in red on your calendar is July 1st, 2026. As of that day, registration in swissdamed is officially mandatory for all devices on the Swiss market.
Mandatory, okay, but they did mention a transition period, right?
Yes, and it's a critical one. They've built in a grace period for the second half of 2026. This means you can continue to place your devices on the market during that time without having registered them first. But there's a big string attached. You absolutely must complete the registration by December 31st, 2026.
So it's a 6-month window to get your house in order and upload all your data. What happens if a company misses that December 31st deadline?
Well, that's when the rules get very strict. From January 1st, 2027 onwards, any device must be registered in swissdamed before it can be placed on the market. The grace period is gone. If you're not in the system, you can't sell. It's as simple as that.
Okay, that's a very clear line in the sand. Now, registration usually comes with costs. Was there any news on fees?
Yes, a new fee ordinance also took effect on July 1st, 2026. The structure seems fairly straightforward. It's a one-time charge per UDI/DI for any device that has an on-the-market status. So you pay once for each unique device identifier you register.
And how are companies expected to get all this data into the system? What are the options?
They're offering 3 methods to cater to different company sizes and needs. For companies with just a few devices, there's a manual entry option called the online editor. For companies with larger portfolios, there's an XML bulk upload. And for the large multinational corporations, they support a machine-to-machine or M2M data exchange.
That M2M connection is a big deal. It requires a significant upfront investment in IT infrastructure to build that bridge between a company's internal systems and swissdamed. But once it's built, it automates the entire process. For a company managing thousands of UDI/DIs, it's really the only viable long-term solution.
I agree. And speaking of system features, they also announced that an importer linking function is coming in fall 2026, which will be another key piece of the puzzle for managing the supply chain.
And the updates didn't stop with the webinar. Just a few weeks later, on June 19th, swissdamed rolled out another major update to the UDI devices module itself. It seems they're moving fast to get this fully operational.
They are. This update officially activated some of the features we just discussed. The online editor is now live, and the M2M registration is formally supported. But the big new piece of information was the introduction of full support for the master UDI/DI.
Okay, let's break that down for our listeners. What exactly is a master UDI/DI, and why is it so important?
It's essentially a grouping mechanism. Think about highly individualized devices, like contact lenses. You could have dozens of parameters, different powers, base curves, diameters, colors. Registering a unique UDI/DI for every single possible combination would be an administrative nightmare, creating millions of entries.
Right, it would be completely unmanageable.
Exactly. So the master UDI/DI acts as a single primary identifier for that whole group of device variants. It's a much more elegant solution. And Swissmedic has set deadlines for this. Contact lens manufacturers need to use master UDI/DIs starting November 9th, 2026. And for spectacle-related devices, the deadline is November 1st, 2028.
The key takeaway here seems to be that swissdamed is increasingly mirroring the functionality of Eudamed. This kind of alignment is hugely beneficial for manufacturers because it allows them to reuse data structures, processes, and even technical solutions across both the EU and Swiss markets, which saves an enormous amount of time and money.
It's a very positive step towards regulatory harmonization.
All right, let's leave Europe for a moment and head to the Middle East. The Saudi Food and Drug Authority, or SFDA, has just released a very important new guidance document on the topic of bundling medical devices for marketing authorization.
Bundling. This is always a hot topic. Getting the strategy right can save companies a fortune in application fees and a lot of administrative headaches. What's changing in Saudi Arabia?
The new guidance, known as MDS-28, is quite comprehensive. The biggest changes are for surgical instruments and IVDs. For surgical instruments, it's actually a major simplification.
Oh, a simplification is always good news. How so?
Previously, instruments had to share the same specific intended use to be bundled. Now, they only need to share the same general function. For example, the guidance gives categories like cutting, grasping, or retracting.
Wow, so a company that makes a full set of surgical scissors and scalpels could potentially group them all under the cutting function in a single application. That's a game changer.
It really is. On the other hand, the rules for in vitro diagnostic products, or IVDs, have been completely overhauled and now more structured. A new 7-category grouping system has been introduced. To bundle IVDs, they must now fall into the same one of these 7 categories.
So while that might require more upfront analysis to classify the products correctly, it likely provides much more clarity and consistency than the old system.
Exactly. The guidance also clarifies rules for other device types. For procedure packs, there's a new requirement for a mandatory component table in the documentation. And for devices bundled as a system, like an imaging machine with its specific software and console, it's no longer enough just to have the system name on the label. The technical file itself must now contain information that clearly and explicitly links all the components together.
That makes sense. It forces manufacturers to prove in the documentation that these separate parts are designed, validated, and intended to function as a single unit. It's a good step for traceability and safety.
Okay, from Saudi Arabia, let's head back to Europe for a really important update from the European Commission regarding the Medical Device Regulation, or MDR.
Let me guess. This has to do with well-established technologies.
You got it. For context, the MDR significantly raised the bar for clinical evidence. The well-established technology, or WET designation, provides some relief from the most stringent conformity assessment requirements for devices that have stable, common designs and a long history of safety. The Commission has just published regulations that expand the lists of these WET devices.
This is what a lot of manufacturers have been waiting for. Which types of devices have been added?
There are 2 key lists. The first one expands the group of Class 2B implantable devices that are exempt from a per-device technical documentation assessment by a notified body. It now includes things like cannulas, catheters, bone fillers, and various spinal fixation devices like screws, rods, and plates.
So these are the bread and butter products for many surgical and orthopedic companies. This should really help streamline their notified body reviews.
It should. The second list is for implantable and Class 3 devices that are now exempted from the obligation to perform a new clinical investigation. This list includes many of those same devices, as well as others like reusable surgical instruments and guide wires.
Now, this is the point where we need to be extremely clear. This exemption sounds massive, but it does not mean manufacturers can just skip providing clinical evidence.
Yes, this is the most critical part of the update. The exemption does not remove the obligation to conduct a full, systematic clinical evaluation. You still need a comprehensive clinical evaluation report, or CER, based on existing clinical data from literature, equivalent devices, and your own pre-market and post-market data.
Right. And it also doesn't remove the requirement for post-market clinical follow-up, or PMCF. Your PMCF plan still needs to be solid, and you still need to be actively collecting data on your device's performance once it's on the market.
Precisely. The relief is on the pre-market investigation side, but the lifelong clinical evaluation and post-market surveillance obligations remain fully intact.
Excellent clarification. For our final topic, let's jump over to Mexico. The regulatory authority there, COFEPRIS, has just published new guidance that is fantastic news for manufacturers looking to enter or expand into the Mexican market.
Okay, I'm listening. Anything that streamlines new registrations is a big deal. What's the focus of this new guidance?
It's all about reliance. This is part of a global trend where mature regulatory agencies recognize and rely on the work of their trusted counterparts. This new guidance clarifies the documentation requirements for two specific reliance-based pathways.
So you can use an existing approval from another country to speed up your registration in Mexico. What are the two pathways?
The first route is called the equivalency agreements pathway. This is specifically for devices that have already been authorized by the US FDA, Health Canada, or Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare.
Okay, so approvals from those three key markets. What's the second option?
The second is the abbreviated regulatory pathway, and this one is a bit broader. It allows companies to leverage approvals from a wider set of recognized reference regulatory authorities.
This is really smart. It says, if a device has already undergone a rigorous review by a trusted agency, we can trust that review and fast-track our own. It saves resources for everyone. But are there any pitfalls to watch out for?
Yes, and the guidance is very clear on this. The key is that the device being submitted to COFEPRIS must be identical to the one approved by the reference authority. The device configuration, the intended use, the labeling, the manufacturing process, everything has to be a perfect match.
So you can't use your FDA approval for a 3-size product line to register a 4-size product line in Mexico. No discrepancies are allowed.
Exactly. Any deviation could get the application rejected. But for companies with a solid global regulatory strategy, this is a massive advantage. It makes accessing the significant Mexican market much faster and more predictable. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Reg with Meg. Join us next time for another regulatory roundup into the world of regulatory affairs. Stay informed and stay compliant. Bye, guys.